The story begins by showing a businessman named Frankie, who visits an illegal underground fight to find a fighter to recruit as her employee. There, Frankie finds a fighter who has never been defeated. His name is Carter. However, something strange happens when a man in a jacket suddenly enters the arena and prepares to fight Carter. At first, Carter and the crowd bully the man, but when he takes off his jacket, they are immediately terrified. As it turned out, this man was a former UFC middleweight fighter named Elwood Dalton. Knowing he would lose, Carter chose to walk away and let Dalton be the winner.
He said, "Fuck you, I'm gonna fight that guy. Fuck you." Here's your money.
After getting the bet money, Dalton walked to his car. However, just then, a thug stabbed Dalton in the stomach and demanded that Dalton pay his debt immediately. However, when the thug saw Dalton's angry face, he abandoned his intention. He would rather leave than die at Dalton's hands. When Dalton was about to treat his wound, he was visited by Frankie, who offered him a job as a guard at her place of business, the Roadhouse, because every night, her place of business always had a commotion. Frankie promised Dalton a large salary for the risks he would take.
Cops are no fucking help. All my fucking bouncers have ran off.
Unfortunately, Dalton refused.
Try Carter.
Despite his refusal, Frankie still gave him the address of her place of business in case Dalton changed his mind. After treating his wound, Dalton slept in the car. Apparently, Dalton lives as a homeless person due to his past. Later, he is woken up by a policewoman who asks him not to sleep on the side of the road. While driving, Dalton began to experience depression about his past. He even contemplates committing suicide by letting his car get hit by a train. However, when Dalton remembers that maybe working at the Roadhouse will change his life, he cancels his plans. He was almost killed by the train. The next day, Dalton arrives in a small town in Florida. He is dropped off at a bus stop, where he meets a girl named Charlie. Charlie and her father, Stephen, own a bookstore. Charlie gives Dalton a book and tells him that Frankie's Roadhouse is nearby.
It's just up the highway past mile marker 77.
Dalton then walks to the Roadhouse. Once there, Dalton feels comfortable and reveals to the employees that this place is cool and peaceful.
Nice place you got here. Peaceful.
However, once night fell, and Frankie's bar was full, people started making trouble because of drunk visitors. One of the employees, Billy, started separating the troublemakers while Dalton monitored the situation calmly. Just then, a motorbike gang led by Dell came to the bar. Dell began to make trouble and scare the visitors, knowing that they were the most powerful gang in this place. Seeing Dell go too far, Dalton intervened and warned Dell not to make trouble.
Well, who the fuck are you, Mr. Smiley?
Mr. Smiley?
I got some work to do.
However, Dell refused. Dalton then came out of the bar and pretended to damage their motorbike, so the gang came out to stop him. This is where Dalton began to beat the gang with his martial arts skills. In a matter of seconds, he defeated the gang members, including one who suffered a serious concussion from Dalton's punch. Although Dalton beats up the troublemakers, he is still responsible and takes them to the hospital in Frankie's car. Ellie thanks Dalton for beating up the thugs. Ellie then sees a stab wound on Dalton's stomach and takes him in for treatment.
So you like to fight? It's not infected, but I'll need to suture this.
After being treated, Dalton returns to the Roadhouse and receives a salary from Frankie. Since it was late at night, Frankie suggested Dalton sleep at a nearby hotel. However, Dalton refused and instead wanted to sleep on Frankie's old boat on the nearby dock. Frankie allowed it but warned Dalton about the estuarine crocodiles that often attacked dock visitors. While cleaning the old boat, Dalton met the dockmaster, John, who told him that he had lost his dog to a crocodile. When he fell asleep, Dalton dreamt about his past, which made him who he is today. In the past, Dalton fought with a UFC fighter who was also his friend. However, the two fought after mocking each other's parents' names. In that fight, Dalton almost lost, but he got up and hit his opponent so brutally that his opponent died on the spot. This was why Dalton chose to retire and live as a homeless man. Dalton was then woken up by one of Frankie's employees, Laura. She came to thank him for beating Dell and gave Dalton breakfast in return.
Breakfast burrito.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
After breakfast, Dalton went to Charlie's bookstore to borrow her PC. At the same time, Charlie accidentally sees Dell's men rampaging in the shop next door. She chases them away with a baseball bat, but of course they are not afraid until they finally see Dalton and run away. Dalton and Charlie then tell a little story about their respective life problems, where Charlie reveals that her mother has died, and her father has to work on the side to make ends meet, because it's not enough to eat if you only rely on the bookstore. Dell's men then went to a small yacht in the middle of the sea to meet their boss, Ben. They reported the failure of their plan to disturb the roadhouse because now the roadhouse has guards who can defeat them. Hearing this, Ben did not want to know and asked them to get rid of Dalton by killing him.
You're all supposed to have this job done by now.
Meanwhile, Dalton spent his afternoon teaching Billy how to fight troublemakers. His method was successful in securing one of the visitors who carried a knife. In addition to being friends with Billy, Dalton is also friends with one of Frankie's employees, Ref.
Oh, happy?
One day, Dalton accidentally meets Ellie at a restaurant. The two of them chatted about how the city is full of crime, and even the police can't fight it. Therefore, Ellie warns Dalton to stay careful while living here.
Enjoy your conch chowder.
In the evening, Dalton met Frankie to ask for his salary for working for 1 week. After getting his salary, Dalton returned to the dock on foot. However, on the way, a car driven by an unknown person suddenly tried to hit Dalton. Dalton fell into the sea with his car while the passenger ran away.
Shut up!
My fucking truck.
Long story short, when Dalton arrives at the old ship, he is surprised by Dell, who is ready to kill him with a gun. However, Dalton remained calm and lured Dell into talking. When Dell raised his rifle, Dalton immediately kicked Dell and beat him until he fell into the sea.
So you're gonna kill me now?
Why would I kill you?
Even though Dell was about to kill him, Dalton still wanted to forgive him. Unfortunately, when Dalton was about to pull Dell, a crocodile suddenly pounced on Dell and dragged him into the water. The next day, Dalton was questioned by the police and found not guilty of Dell's death. The next day, Ben and his men discussed their plan, demolishing the roadhouse and building an entertainment center. Just then, Ben gets a call from his father, Gerald, a Florida mob boss now in prison. However, Ben refuses to pick up the phone and instead throws it away. Because Ben wouldn't pick up the phone, Gerald called Knox, his former right-hand man, who had just left prison. His defiant style makes everyone sick, but they can't fight Knox, a street fighter. Gerald orders Knox to get rid of the roadhouse guards. The next day, Dalton is taken out to sea by Ellie, who has just borrowed her ex-boyfriend's luxury boat. Arriving at sea, Ellie invites Dalton to take a photo. Meanwhile, Ben comes to his headquarters and finds Knox, who has just beaten all his men. Knox then reveals that Ben's father asked him to remove the roadhouse guards. Knox also revealed that Ben's father was very angry because Ben always failed to continue his father's business.
Thank you. After that, you can set it all on fire.
My man,
Wonderful.
On the other hand, Ben's men, mainly David, go to Charlie's bookstore and deliberately burn it down to scare Dalton. After taking pictures, Dalton returns to the old ship. However, just after arriving there, he is immediately approached by two policemen who ask him to come to the police station. However, Instead of going to the police station, they took Dalton to an abandoned ship, where Dalton was confronted by the Florida chief of police named Ricky. Ricky asks Dalton to leave town immediately. Of course, Ricky's words confused Dalton. He also asked Ricky to explain his mistake, but Ricky did not want to answer and would instead kill Dalton.
You have a death wish, son?
At that very moment, Ellie comes to stop Ricky, who turns out to be her father. Ellie then immediately took Dalton away. On the way, Ellie tells him that her father works for Gerald, Ben's father. The townspeople also know that Gerald is the most powerful mafia boss. In fact, even though he is in prison, he can still hire the police to fight those who interfere with his plans, including Dalton. Ellie then advises Dalton to leave this place quickly before he gets killed. However, Dalton returns to the roadhouse at night to discover what happened. There, Dalton meets Ben, who reminds Dalton not to interfere in his affairs. However, Dalton refuses and chooses to stay there. Because Dalton refused to comply with his request, Ben told Knox to beat Dalton up.
All right, lads, let's go.
Knox then started making noise by breaking bottles and beating people.
Take it out.
The chaos Knox caused upset other visitors, and eventually, a big fight broke out. This made Dalton intervene and start fighting with Knox.
That's what. Watch me pull your face. No one get this close.
In the fight, Dalton was overwhelmed because it turned out that Knox's punches were harder. Realizing his brutal opponent, Dalton left just as the police arrived.
Dalton, hey, are you okay?
Dalton then cleans his body of blood. After that, he intended to leave town. However, just then, Frankie arrived. Frankie finally revealed that she was still defending the roadhouse from Ben and Gerald because this place was her family heritage. Even so, Dalton doesn't care because he feels he is being forced by Frankie to fight the mafia.
Are you really that afraid?
Yes, I am afraid. More than you could ever understand.
When Dalton goes to the bus pickup point, he accidentally sees that Charlie's bookshop has been burnt down and gets the news that Charlie and her father are in hospital with bruises from being hit by an unknown man. Hearing this, Dalton became very angry. He finally decides not to go and will deal with the thugs alone. Dalton then met David, who was cleaning the table. Without a preamble, Dalton immediately hit David's collarbone, which resulted in David falling into the pool and drowning to death.
I'm afraid of what happens when somebody pushes me too far.
As Dalton carries David's body to the car, he meets one of Dell's men, Mo, who immediately asks Dalton for mercy, so he doesn't beat him up. Mo also told Dalton that at 5 a.m., Ricky and Ben would make a drug deal on the beach.
Good luck with the guy.
Long story short, at exactly 5 o'clock, Dalton was on standby on the beach to monitor the transaction. When one of the police officers was about to load a large suitcase onto the boat, Dalton immediately beat him up and opened the suitcase, which turned out to contain the money from the drug sales run by Ben and Ricky. After Dalton hides the money, he shoots the body and then beats the policeman.
What's that over there?
Later that day, while Dalton is making a bomb on the old ship, Ricky approaches him and tells him that Ben has kidnapped Ellie. He also asks Dalton to hand over the money he hid to Ben so Ellie can be exchanged.
It's his money, the money you took. If my daughter means anything to you, you'll help me get her back.
Knowing this, Dalton borrowed Ellie's ex-boyfriend's boat and went to Ben's yacht. Once there, Dalton starts making small talk about Ellie being kidnapped. However, Ricky reveals that Ellie was never kidnapped. All this is just Ricky's trick to get Dalton to come. But who would have thought it turns out that Ben did kidnap Ellie, and that makes Ricky angry.
The fuck, Ben?
I wouldn't do that.
Once I get my money, you can have her.
Son of a bitch!
When they see Knox about to arrive, Dalton detonates his bomb.
What the hell is he doing?
The explosion causes the ship to leak, so Dalton enters the ship's cabin to save Ellie. However, when the two meet, the glass barrier suddenly breaks, causing them to rise to the surface of the sea. This is where Ben drags Ellie to the jet boat and takes her away while Knox tries to kill Dalton by crashing his boat. However, Dalton dodges and instead manages to take over the boat. Seeing that Dalton was still alive, Ben then tried to ram his ship into Dalton's boat, but Dalton jumped first and fell into Ben's ship. When the boat was about to hit the shoreline of the roadhouse, Dalton and Ellie jumped first, while Ben bounced off the roof of the roadhouse. Meanwhile, Knox swims to the bridge and robs one of the cars to get to the roadhouse. There, Dalton begins to approach Ben and beat him brutally. In the middle of it, Knox suddenly hit them with a car, and from there, the second fight between Dalton and Knox occurred.
You're a shit driver.
Wrong side of the road.
In the fight, the two brought out their respective martial arts techniques. Dalton also used a Khabib Nurmagomedov-style submission to defeat Knox. However, because Dalton is not Khabib, Knox escaped and counterattacked Dalton with pointed wood. Seeing Dalton helpless, Ben asked Knox to kill him. However, Knox is fed up with Ben and kills him instead. Knox then continued to attack Dalton with pointed wood. Still, Dalton was able to hold him back and turn the situation around by attacking Knox back, finally making Knox die on the spot. After killing Knox, Ricky and Ellie ask Dalton to leave town because Dalton will be imprisoned if he stays.
I'm sorry.
It's time for you to go, Dalton. You were never here. I got you covered.
As Dalton waits for the bus, he is approached by Charlie, who is now on the mend. She thanks Dalton for defeating the thugs.
That's always how the story ends, right?
On the other hand, Stephen goes into his shop and accidentally finds a suitcase full of money. Dalton deliberately hides the cash in Charlie's shop so that Charlie can rebuild her shop with it. Dalton then leaves the city of Florida. Dalton's departure makes Frankie sad, but she feels relieved and calm because Dalton has defeated the mobsters who disturbed her business. The film then closes with Knox, who is alive after being hospitalized.